The exact feeling, no seat is going to be more than 6 rows from the audience, or say 20 feet from the center of the stage. You'll be able to see the eyes of the actors. The theater will be in the round, but it will also be adjustable.
Golden is unique because we have kind of this trifecta. We have a trifecta of, we have residents, we have businesses, and we have nonprofits. And when all 3 of those work together, you have a thriving community. And that thriving community goes back to our mission statement, and to invest in the economic and cultural vitality of the Golden community.
No matter where you find yourself in the new theater, Miners Alley Performing Arts Center is going to have a special seat and a special piece of history just for you.
We hope you get to experience art in your community. Thanks again to Thornton Arts and Culture for having us. We'll see you next time on Connected Colorado.
Welcome to your Denver City Council. Please stand by. Full coverage of your Denver City Council begins now.
My mic is muted. Welcome, everyone. Samar Alejandro, would you please introduce yourself and let our viewers know how to enable translation on their devices?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Guzman. I'm here with the CLC, and along with my colleague Alejandro, we will be interpreting today's meeting into Spanish. I will now give the instructions in Spanish. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Samuel Guzmán y estoy aquí con la CLC. Junto con mi colega Alejandro, y estaremos interpretando la reunión de hoy en español. Si desea escuchar en español, vaya al icono en su pantalla que dice Interpretación, seleccione ese icono y seleccione el idioma de español y podrá escuchar en su idioma preferido. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sam. Welcome to the Denver City Council meeting of Monday, March 20th, 2023. Council members, please rise as you're able and join Councilwoman Sandoval in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. And council members, please join Councilwoman Sandoval as she leads us in the Denver City Council land acknowledgement.
The Denver City Council honors and acknowledges that the land on which we reside is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to work to dismantling ongoing legacies of oppression and inequities and recognize the current and future contributions of Indigenous communities in Denver.
Thank you so much. Madam Secretary, roll call.
Tabaka.
Here.
Herndon.
Here.
Black.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Flynn.
Here.
Gilmore.
Here.
Hines.
Here.
Cashman.
Here.
Kinich.
Here.
Ortega. Here. Sandoval.
Here.
Sawyer. Here. Madam President.
Here.
13 members present.
There are 13 members present. Council has a quorum. Approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes of March 13th? Seeing none, the minutes stand approved. Council announcements. Are there any announcements today? Councilman Flynn.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make a brief announcement and wish everybody happy spring equinox. About 10 minutes ago, it became spring. I'm glad we survived the winter.
Thank you so much. Councilman Cashman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I just want to remind all the residents in the near southeast neighborhoods of Washington, Virginia Vale, Virginia Village, Indian Creek, Goldsmith, and University Hills North that the draft recommendations for the near southeast area plan are on view on the city website. We would love to have your comments on any changes you think need to be made to the recommendations. The matter is going before Planning Board in the middle of April and Council thereafter. You can find that plan by going to denvergov.org/near southeast plan. It's going to have recommendations for how your neighborhoods might develop over the next couple of decades. Please make your voice heard. denvergov.org/near southeast plan. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much. Councilman Sandoval.
Thank you. I'm hosting a meeting on this Wednesday at 6:30 at Centro de Barrio at 1351 to work on the historic designation of La Raza Park. I brought forward before this council in 2020 the official name change from Columbus Park to La Raza Park, and now I'm working on the historic designation. If you'd like to join the meeting or have more information, would like more information, please contact my office at district1@denvergov.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you, Madam President. In light of us doing our land acknowledgement, I just wanted to recognize this past weekend was the annual March powwow, and I'm not sure why we didn't have a proclamation this year, but I think it's important to always do that in the spirit of letting people know about that annual event and the contributions of many of our ancestors who came long before us and resided on these lands. And so just wanted to call that out so that maybe next year we make sure that we do have a proclamation on behalf of that event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Hines.
Thank you, Council President. For residents in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, we've heard a bit of concern about Colfax and Ogden and 14th and Ogden. We are considering putting together a town hall for that area. If you have interest in participating in that town hall, please reach out to my office, district10@denvergov.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One quick announcement for me. I love to announce our various food and community festivals. We have a Pozole Festival coming up in District 3, Friday and Saturday out on Morrison Road in the Westwood neighborhood. Over a dozen Pozole varieties from local community and professional chefs, the absolute best. So pencil it in Friday night, Saturday during the day out at 3800 Morrison Road. Seeing no one else in queue, there are no presentations, there are no communications, there are no proclamations being read this afternoon. Madam Secretary, please read the bills for introduction.
In Finance and Governance Committee, 23-0210, a bill for an ordinance amending the classification and pay plan for employees in the career service and for certain employees not in the career service. 23-0215, a bill for an ordinance approving the respective First Amendments to service plan for the respective Denargo Market Metropolitan District numbers 1 to 3. 23-0218, a bill for an ordinance revising section 18-5 of the revised Municipal Code of Denver by changing the date by which the Career Service Board shall recommend classification and pay plan adjustments to the mayor and city council from August 1st of each year to September 1st of each year. In Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee, 23-20206, a bill for an ordinance designating 618 South Monroe Way as a structure for preservation.
Great, thank you so much. Council members, this is your last chance to call out an item. Councilwoman Sandoval, will you make the motions for us today?
Yes, Council President.
I'll do a recap. Under resolutions, Councilmember Flynn has called out resolution 207 for comment. Under bills for introduction, no items have been called out. Under bills for final consideration, no items have been called out. Under pending, no items have been called out. Madam Secretary, please put the first item on our screens. Councilman Flynn, go ahead with your comments on resolution 207.
Thank you, Madam President. Resolution 0207 is an architectural contract in an amount just under $9.3 million with an architectural consultant that specializes in small academic or civic performing arts projects. It is Perkins Eastman and their Pfeiffer Studio. This represents the start, Madam President and colleagues and members of the audience here and on Channel 8. This represents the start of the single largest city investment ever to take place in Southwest Denver. This is the restoration, renovation, and reopening of the Mae Bonfils Stanton Performing Arts Center on the Loretto Heights campus, to be operated by donation to the city by the owner, to be operated by Denver Arts and Venues, the same agency that operates Red Rocks, the Buell, the Coliseum, the Convention Center, and other venues in the city. Along with that, the city is intending to acquire the adjoining library building, which is no longer a library, of course, but to be used as a cultural hub. Think the McNichols building downtown, but in Southwest Denver, adjoining a performing arts complex. This is such a meaningful project for Southwest Denver and the Southwest Metro, and for small tier 3 SCFD groups as well, who have been missing that venue, that stage that seats the 800 to 900 audience ever since the Loretto Heights College closed down. But what I really like about this project, Madam President and others, is that it will be accessible to the community. The Sisters of Loretto built this as a curricular facility for their performing arts theater program, which was nationally known at Loretto Heights under Max DiGiulio. And because of that, there are spaces in this building that can be used for small performances, for community meetings, for many other functions, for ballet, for dance, for all sorts of the performing arts. And to be adjoining the library once that's acquired, this is going to be a complete cultural hub for Southwest Denver. It's meaningful to me personally also because one of the reasons I am up here today in the position that I am, I owe to my experience in performing arts. From the age of 10, I got involved in community theater. When I was a 10-year-old middle child in a family of 5 boys, coming out of my shell, wondering what I wanted to do with my life, being on stage at the age of 10 really hooked me on performing arts. And I stayed with it all the way through college. My last show was I played Linus in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. No, I won't sing My Blanket and Me, but it was formative in my life. And I know that this project, when completed in 2026, this project will be a life changer for untold numbers of 10-year-old girls and boys in Southwest Denver right now who are trying to find themselves as well. And maybe one day they will find themselves up here in this seat as well. So, Madam President, I'm really looking forward to this project being completed. And I would like all members to join me in voting aye on this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Flynn. It's definitely exciting. Congratulations. Seeing no one else in queue, that concludes the items to be called out. All bills for introduction are ordered published. Council members, remember this is a consent or block vote. You'll need to vote aye. Otherwise, this is your last chance to call on an item for a separate vote. Councilwoman Sandoval, you please put the proclamations and resolutions for adoption and the bills on final consideration for final passage on the floor.
I move that the proclamations and resolutions be adopted and bills on final consideration be placed upon final consideration and do pass in a block for the following items: 0313, 0219, 0220, 0221, 0222, 0223, 0224, 0225, 0226, 0227, 0200, 0201, 0202, 0203, 0204, 0205, 0211, 0212, 0213, 0216, 0217, 0194, 0207, 0208, 0232, 0233, 0209, 0214, 0228, 0314, 0315, 0187, 0188, 0199, 0192, and that's it.
Thank you so much. And can I get a motion and second? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, roll call.
Sita Baca? Sita Baca? Herndon?
Aye.
Black?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Flynn? Gilmore?
Aye.
Hines?
Aye.
Cashman?
Aye.
Kinich?
Aye.
Ortega? Sandoval?
Aye.
Sawyer? Madam President?
Aye. Madam Secretary, close voting and announce the results.
12 ayes.
12 ayes. The resolutions have been adopted and the bills have been placed upon final consideration and do pass. Tonight, there are no public hearings. If there are no objections from the members of council, we will recess until 5:30.
In March on Elevating Denver. Wonder at the vast cosmos above.
Sometimes they don't believe what they're seeing.
In Dog We Trust at the Colorado Kennel Club.
If you love dogs, this is the place to be.
And go backstage with the Family Theater Company. Those stories and more on the next episode of Elevating Denver.
Hey Denver, the decision is yours on April 4th. Make your voice heard by voting in the 2023 municipal election. Stay up to date on the candidates and the issues you'll see on your ballot at denverdecides.org. There you'll find Denver's most complete guide to help you choose your next mayor, city council members, and more. Candidate profiles, live candidate forums, and ballot issue breakdowns can all be found at denverdecides.org. Denver Decides, where Denver voters turn to get informed.
I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and the first social action that my sorority ever did was to be a part of women's suffrage. That act on its own paved the way for me to sit in this chair today. we have an obligation, we have an opportunity to be transformative by our act of voting.
Get ready, Denver. It's almost time to vote for our mayor, city council, clerk and recorder, auditor, and more on Election Day, April 4th. Ballots go out March 13th, and you have until March 27th to return it by mail or drop it off when it's convenient for you at any one of the citywide ballot drop boxes or drive-thrus. If you choose to vote in person, vote centers will be open through 7 p.m. on Election Day. To help research your vote, watch upcoming Denver Decides forums and visit denvervotes.org. Drop off your ballot or be in line to vote by 7 p.m. on Tuesday, April 4th. And be ready when it's time to vote.
Do you want to be active in your community, but you don't know when or where things are happening? Well, don't sweat it. Just check out the upcoming events calendar on denvergov.org. It's your one-stop shop for community meetings, online workshops, and more, so you can be fully informed and involved. You can even search by date, keyword, or even what neighborhood you live in. Plus, you can also see on what holidays the city is closed. The upcoming events calendar, yet another great feature on the all-new denvergov.org.
Hola Denver, la decisión es suya el 4 de abril. Haga oír su voz votando en las elecciones municipales de 2023. Manténgase actualizado sobre los candidatos y los problemas que verá en su boleta electoral en denverdecides.org. Allí encontrará la guía más completa de Denver para ayudarlo a elegir su próximo alcalde, miembros del Consejo Municipal y más. Los perfiles de los candidatos, los foros de candidatos en vivo y los desgloses de las boletas se pueden encontrar en denverdecides.org. Denver Decides, donde los votantes de Denver recurren para informarse.
I hope these cars are insured.
With the push of a button, the equalizer is ready to roll.
Okay, I'm ready.
And go!
No lo creo. Oh boy.
That is awesome. As the 10-ton behemoth barrels down the street, Deanna doesn't stand a chance.
Deanna was scared.
He said I was scared? I was not scared.
Oh yeah? Let's see that in instant replay.
Well, maybe a little scared.
Would you have been able to stop in time had I walked out?
There's no possible way I would have stopped. I probably would have crashed and you could have got killed.
Wow, that would not be good.
It's clear that the best place to cross the street is at an intersection or crosswalk.
If you step out between two parked cars, the driver might not have time to stop.
Fortunately, I didn't have to learn that the hard way.
You can never rely on a driver to see you and stop in time. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Getting There Safely. Until next time, remember to stay safe and always walk with your eyes.
So, what should we cover next?
Well, when do we get to do jetpacks? I think jetpacks would be pretty cool.
Or we could test some stuff at the beach. Oh, I like that.
Or we could do jetpacks at the beach.
From the west, where snow on the mountain summits is visible the whole year round, the eye may sweep away to the north over a fertile and beautiful agricultural region along the foothills. To the northwest, where the South Platte winds its way, appearing like a ribbon of silver in its fringing of greenery. Far to the east, where the billowy plains roll to hazy distances until the sky bends down to meet them. To the south, where the divide between the Platte and the Arkansas rivers stretches from the mountains far out on the plains. The city itself is spread out at the feet of the beholder, who now appreciates its beauty, its extent, and the charm of its location as he never did, never could before. Jerome C. Smiley, from the Capitol Dome, 1895.
Crowning the summit of Browns Bluff in the heart of Denver, the Colorado Capitol Building is among the great architectural treasures of the American West. The preeminent achievement of the most accomplished Capitol architect in U.S. history. Its gilded dome, a glowing icon, stands in stately congress with the majestic peaks of the Rocky Mountains. Marble floors, grand hallways, a soaring rotunda. These things are part of the lexicon of Capitol buildings everywhere. But the native Yule Creek marble used in the Colorado Capitol is so fine that it was selected also for the Lincoln Memorial and Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The stunning rose onyx that lines the walls is so rare that its single known deposit was used only in this building. The bronze closing era statue on the East Lawn has won critical praise and renown since its debut at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893.
Everything in the Capitol building, whether it's the art, the architecture, any material in the building, is going to reflect the state of Colorado as a whole. It all says something about what we as Coloradoans choose to remember, choose to honor from our state's past, our shared experience.
It is a finely crafted building, whether it's the wood or the marble or the stone or the brass. And it's impressive how accurate and how capable these people were 110 years ago. This is as fine an example of the neoclassical Corinthian design as there exists in our country.
But for all the glory of its art and architecture, the Capitol's greatest claim for reverence may be its least visible, least tangible feature. That is, history itself. For it is here, beneath the Capitol Dome, that the perennial questions of Colorado politics first took shape. The rights of labor and property, the fairness and transparency of the political process, the proper balance between spending and taxation, the size and role of government. And it is here that the people of Colorado continue to debate these issues. The Colorado Capitol embodies for all time the principles and traditions of American democracy. But it remains, as the society it represents, a work in progress. In the twisting vortex of history, it is the place at the middle, where ideals must do battle with expediency, where public service comes up against personal gain, where unity is fashioned from diversity.
The state capitol sits above the rest of the city of Denver at a spot that is so central to our history and to our interest, where the Platte River comes out of the mountains on the crux between the mountains and plains. This is the spiritual as well as the physical center of this state.
You have to give kids the opportunity to see the vastness of their state. Not only the beauty of the architecture, but the meaning that is behind that architecture.
It's all about the people who've made a difference in Colorado and the natural resources that have made Colorado a great state. And that one thread that weaves throughout the history of the state is the Capitol building.
These public buildings are sort of built as cathedrals are, to add some grandeur and significance and awe to the whole experience. And it sure worked on me. I walked into that chamber and you look around and you think about what's gone on there over the 100 years, and you get a sense of your own place in a stream of history.
With us are the Continental Eagles and the Continental Cause.
immortalized by the purity of Washington, illuminated by the wisdom of Jefferson, vindicated and restored by the illustrious Jackson. Governor William Gilpin, Colorado Territory, 1861.
America's founding fathers were driven by two big ideas. First, that the United States was the successor to all the great and glorious traditions of Europe. And second, that it was destined to surpass Europe in every way. They believed America's unique democratic institutions would create a spirit of enterprise unprecedented in history. As Thomas Jefferson put it, no constitution was ever before as well calculated as ours for extending extensive empire and self-government. By the latter half of the 19th century, as population growth and economic expansion pushed the productive territory of the young nation to the Mississippi River and beyond, these visions of American empire became increasingly more grandiose. It was at this auspicious moment that American State House architecture entered its golden age. In the 20 years from 1866 to 1886, no fewer than 11 state houses were begun, from Connecticut's elaborate Victorian Gothic edifice to elegant classical structures in Michigan, Texas, and the new centennial state of Colorado. At the furthest frontiers of the new nation, sheer backwardness and isolation might have been expected to make settlers a bit circumspect about this grand vision of empire, but this was far from being the case. The pioneers who settled Colorado in the early 1860s not only believed in American empire, they believed they would one day be at the center of it all. Few believed this more fervently than William Gilpin, soldier, explorer, author, and first territorial governor of Colorado.
The existence of the precious and base metals in absolutely inexhaustible abundance and variety, the universal fertility of the soil upon the flanks of the great mountains as upon the plains, the uniform splendor and salubrity of the climate, the facility of transit and penetration by roads over all varieties of surface. These facts promise unrivaled rapidity of progress, prosperity, and power.
In fact, early Coloradoans were so convinced of the wealth and power destined to flow into their capital that they spent more than 10 years battling over just where it should be located.
Colorado's territorial government had a really hard time finding a home. Not only did it bounce around from place to place within Denver, but it bounced around to Colorado City for a brief period, to Golden as well, and then back to Denver. Denver, for better or for worse, was where the action was. It was where our economy was developing.
Besides its size and central location, Denver had one more advantage. In 1867, local developer Henry Cordes Brown offered a 10-acre plot on the edge of town for construction of a state capitol building. Because the site sat at a slight elevation relative to Denver's downtown, it became known as Brown's Bluff. However, Brown was no altruist, a fact that would be made clear when he sued the state in 1879 and demanded they return the still undeveloped land. Brown understood that by owning much of the land around a future Capitol building, he stood to make a fortune. The production of silver in Leadville was minting millionaires at a dizzying rate, and Denver's elite liked the idea of building their mansions in the area called Capitol Hill. Raising the necessary funds for a Capitol building proved difficult, however, and the project was soon plagued by seemingly endless delays. In 1874, the territorial legislature appointed a new commission to take such action as would enable the building to be completed by January 1st, 1876. The deadline came and went with little progress. In 1876, Colorado finally won its long battle to attain statehood. But to the intense frustration of Henry Brown, the decade would come to a close with no activity on Brown's Bluff beyond an annual fireworks show to celebrate Independence Day. Then, in an 1881 referendum, Denver finally won the capital designation once and for all.
Denver won because it was the largest town, but Colorado voters being Colorado voters, Durango people voted for Durango, Silverton people voted for Silverton, some people threw their votes away and voted for Pikes Peak, and of course Leadville was convinced it was going to be the capital.
When the site was finalized, the legislature wasted little time planning construction of the Capitol. In 1883, they created a board of Capitol managers and granted them sweeping authority to preside over construction. Then, in the summer of 1885, after a competition that drew architectural submissions from across the nation, the Board of Capitol Managers announced that they had selected none other than the most renowned State House architect of the day, Elijah E. Myers. At the time, many assumed Myers gained the advantage from his role as architect for Denver's most significant government building to date, the Arapahoe County Courthouse. But by the 1880s, Myers' reputation had gone far beyond courthouses.
Myers had already designed the Michigan Capitol. He designed the Texas State Capitol in the meantime. He designed a territorial capital for Idaho. And there's no doubt Myers was the architect to have in the Gilded Age. He's the Frank Lloyd Wright. He's the Frank Gehry of his time.
By 1886, Myers' architectural plan for the Capitol was approved, and $1 million was appropriated to begin construction. The building would be completed, said the supremely confident Capitol managers, no later than New Year's Day, 1890, a prediction that would prove to be wildly optimistic. In the end, 15 years would pass between the sound of the first spade striking the ground in that summer of 1886 and the final interior finishes in 1901. The first delays came almost immediately. Laborers digging the foundations had to go 20 feet before reaching bedrock, 8 feet more than expected. Other delays followed. In 1890, when they expected to celebrate the building's completion, the Capitol managers instead joined tens of thousands of Coloradoans to celebrate the laying of the cornerstone. By then, the estimated cost for the project had grown from an original limit of $1 million to more than $2 million. Both the original contractor and Myers himself had been summarily fired due to cost overruns. The journey before them, obviously, would be a long one. But if the Capitol's construction process was chaotic, the task of building Colorado's government was more turbulent by far.
There was a crowd of tens of thousands, all perched under their umbrellas because the sun was so baking hot. There was a very impressive Masonic ceremony. There was a choir with 1,000 voices, speeches from important judges in early Colorado history, from the governor at the time, Job Cooper. And after the cornerstone was laid, there was a huge barbecue down in Lincoln Park on the west side of the Capitol building with hundreds of animals that had been butchered, barrels of pickles, and immense quantities of lemonade and fireworks at the end of the day. I don't think there's ever been as exciting a day in the Capitol's history as when the cornerstone was laid, and I cannot imagine a more exciting day to be at the Capitol.
Coloradoans had good reason for optimism on that hot summer day in 1890. Despite many delays and difficulties, the project to construct one of the grandest capitals in the West was now well and truly underway. By the end of 1889, the building's thick masonry walls stood almost 50 feet high on the north side and nearly 35 feet on the south side. In keeping with the Board of Governors' pledge to use only Colorado granite, quarrymen at the Aberdeen Quarry near Gunnison, Colorado filled 40 train cars each week. Once the material reached the construction site, a veritable army of 250 laborers, 160 stone cutters, 40 stone setters, and 50 bricklayers set about sorting and shaping it into walls, pillars, and floors. Myers' architectural plans called for an amazing 20,000 granite pieces of varying shapes and sizes to be fitted to the building before it was done. It was the kind of undertaking that stirs the soul.
Geographically, Colorado is among the most exalted states in the Union. Upon the apex of the continent, our capital becomes a lighthouse upon a great eminence, and from there it should radiate a never-fading glow of exalted principles, of high and patriotic examples. Alva Adams.
Rhetoric aside, the political reality of the day was anything but exalted. In fact, far from spreading the virtues of democracy through the land, the Colorado government was more concerned with establishing a basic respect for law and order. Mountain towns in particular doggedly maintained their reputation for brawling, drinking, and corruption, with the most violent conflicts often erupting around disputed land claims. One man who tried to mediate the differences was John Rout. Few men in the state's early history commanded more respect than Rout, elected the first Colorado governor in 1876, and then re-elected 15 years later, just months after the laying of the Capitol cornerstone. Shortly after his re-election, Rout found himself mediating conflicting silver claims in Creede, Colorado, when the mood turned ugly. It seemed many of the miners thought hanging a governor might be an effective way to get their point across. The only thing that saved him was the fact that he had spent years working a mountain claim himself and was not afraid to stand up to threats.
What? You will lynch the old man, will you? Well, you are the biggest lot of damn fools in the United States. Guess you fellows could hang me, all right, but you would be committing murder and you would not get your lots after all. What do you really want, to kill me? Or after process of law, get your titles? Governor John Rout.
These disorderly scenes were by no means limited to the higher elevations. In the spring of 1894, a volatile former lawman by the name of Davis Waite became the first to occupy the Capitol's newly completed governor's office. Governor Waite had earned the nickname Bloody Bridles the year before when he gave a fiery speech that seemed to condone violent rebellion against the capitalist elite.
It is better, infinitely better, that blood should flow to the horses' bridles rather than our national liberties should be destroyed.
Shortly after taking office, Waite became embroiled in an infamous incident at Denver City Hall.
In the 1890s, the governor of Colorado had control of Denver's police and fire commissioners, and Waite launched a campaign to reform what he saw as rampant corruption in the Denver city government by firing the police and fire commissioners. But when those commissioners refused to vacate their offices, Waite very quickly turned to the National Guard. In return, the Denver police and fire departments called on their allies from Denver's criminal underworld, and there was actually a siege at Denver's City Hall on Larimer Street, pitting the National Guard against a combined force of policemen and outlaws.
Waite came within minutes of ordering the troops to open fire with cannon and Gatling guns, but cooler heads prevailed on both sides. Historian Jerome Smiley would later remember the so-called City Hall War as the most disgraceful affair in the history of the government of our city. But for all his emotional indiscretion, Davis Waite's reformist zeal was a direct outgrowth of the times. Colorado's silver-based economy had crashed in 1893, and working people faced with growing uncertainty were angry. As a member of the Populist Party, Waite seemed to stand for the rights of the common man in the face of a capitalist oligarchy that spared little thought for the living conditions of the working poor. In few states were the privileges of the capitalists more unfettered than in Colorado. Miners endured appalling working conditions resulting in high incidence of sickness and death. But the state's Republican-dominated legislature had long made no secret of their sympathy with mine owners. When 6,000 miners walked off the job in Leadville in 1880, Governor Frederick Pitkin wasted little time in sending the National Guard in to quell the unrest and force the miners back to work. Meanwhile, with Pitkin's tacit approval, the mine owners employed Pinkerton detectives to drive strike leaders out of town. It was a pattern that would often be repeated, and it was a recipe for ongoing unrest and instability.
Our capital, with its great lofty dome, massive walls, columns, and portals, is an exceptionally handsome, dignified, and well-proportioned edifice. Few structures in this country are more pleasing in their aspects than it, as it stands there on a commanding site in a splendid park. Jerome Smiley.
By the beginning of 1901, all structural work on the Capitol was complete and the building was fully occupied. The moment had come for Coloradoans to sit back and take stock of their capital. By and large, they were very pleased with what they saw. In its neoclassical grandeur, the new Colorado State House unmistakably embodied the young nation's aspirations to enlightened government and economic might. The central feature, the dome, was cherished for its association with both the Roman Empire and the great Renaissance cathedrals of Europe. The temple front entrances harkened back to the Greek Empire and Athens, the cradle of democracy itself. From its earliest days, the the Capitol building was a marvel of mountain sunlight translated into pattern and color. The polished oak desks of the legislative chambers glowed beneath giant skylights. In the hallways, sunlight pouring through the highest windows cascaded from one polished brass balustrade to the next before striking the vast marble floor and soaring aloft again with undiminished power. In the towering rotunda, this same effect was magnified even more. Here, the marble seemed to glow as if lit from within by some rich and unwavering fire. Intricately layered geometric panels and pilasters carried the light ever upward and outward, an eloquent reminder to legislators that any action taken here would have far-reaching effects. And indeed, the first Colorado legislature to meet in the building in January 1895 in some ways represented a high watermark for democracy in Colorado and the nation at large. Not only was this the second state election in the U.S. with universal suffrage, women having won the right to vote in Colorado in 1893, but it was the first time in American history that women had been elected to serve in a state legislature. In addition to 3 women, the chamber that year included the second African-American representative in Colorado history. From the day the Capitol opened for business in 1894, it became not just the House of Government, but also a vast public museum commemorating the history of Colorado and the American West. Free admission to its growing range of artifacts and artwork soon attracted more than 60,000 visitors a year. Crowded into the Capitol's lower level were offices of the State Geologist, along with the State Historical and Natural History Society and the Horticultural Society. Exhibits included the first printing press from the Rocky Mountain News, cannons confiscated from the Confederate Army at the 1862 Battle of Glorieta Pass, displays of Colorado trees and flowers, an impressive array of stuffed birds, bison, and bears, and even, although not for public viewing, the decapitated heads of 2 notorious bandits, Felipe and Jose Espinosa. For those with more refined tastes, the Capitol boasted an incredible collection of Anasazi artifacts, recovered from recently excavated cliff dwellings in southwestern Colorado. Later moved to the Colorado State Museum and today's History Colorado Center, these astonishing exhibits of pottery, tools, skulls, and mummies rank among the world's most important collections of pre-Columbian artifacts. But far and away the most popular attraction was the Capitol Dome itself. From the 1890s onward, visitors could climb a narrow stairway, walk out in the open air among the dome's supporting pillars, and take in one of the most dramatic views in the American West. The original copper covering on the dome struck many as an inelegant finish to a grand Capitol, particularly in a state forged from silver and gold. After rejecting a silver-clad dome as an unpleasant reminder of economic problems still troubling Colorado, the Capitol managers chose to gild the dome in 1908 with 200 ounces of gold donated by the Colorado Mining Association. In the summer of 1900, the Board of Capitol Managers completed the controversial task of naming 16 Colorado leaders to be honored with stained glass windows inside the soaring Capitol Rotunda.
The only person the entire committee agreed upon was Chief Ouray for his outstanding contributions to keeping peace between his people and the settlers, and his trips to Washington, D.C. on behalf of his people.
Casimiro Varela helped write the Constitution of Colorado, and he served for 40 years.
There was a mountain man chosen named James Baker, who was one of the pioneer fur trappers in early Colorado.
It's really unfair that Frances Weisbach Jacobs is the only woman given our early acceptance of Colorado women's suffrage. But if there's only one, she is a terrific representative.
Throughout Colorado, there were many who hoped the Capitol building's beauty would serve to elevate the spirit of Colorado government to a higher plane, preserving it from the class divisions and corruption then gripping much of the nation. President Theodore Roosevelt added to these hopes when he gave a speech from the Capitol steps in 1903. Nearly 40,000 Coloradoans turned out to hear their president blast the growing power of corporations and promise justice for the middle class.
We must treat each man on his worth and merits as a man. We must see that each is given a square deal because he is entitled to no more and should receive no less.
But the optimism of Roosevelt and the progressives would prove to be misplaced. As tensions between capital and labor grew ever more acrimonious, neither side hesitated to resort to the lowest forms of political corruption to win or hold on to power.
For 3 weeks, I was absent from this city 1,000 miles, and nothing in all my experience so brought the blush of shame to my cheeks as the constant inquiry in every city I visited, what about the terrible election frauds in Denver? A good lady of California showed me clippings from the papers of Washington City showing an investigation by the National Congress that showed up this election blackness in all its horror. Judge Ben Lindsay.
By 1904, tensions between the business-backed government and the increasingly organized wage laborers in the mines and smelting factories had reached an all-time high. In 1903, after blasting the Western Federation of Miners Union as a collection of socialists and anarchists under the evil influence of a criminal leadership, Republican Governor Frederick Peabody declared martial law and sent the National Guard to Cripple Creek, Telluride, and other hotspots. Ostensibly charged with keeping the peace, these troopers were in fact deployed to disrupt the unions and break the morale of strikers by any means necessary. But this time, the miners and their Democratic allies were determined to fight back. Adopting the slogan, "Anybody but Peabody," the miners and the Democratic Party turned their sights on the election of 1904 as their best hope to turn the tide. In a desperate gambit to mitigate the fraud and coercion on the Republican side, Denver's Democratic machine took to rounding up gamblers, prostitutes, ex-convicts, and whoever else could be found to cast multiple ballots in precincts throughout the city. The result was an improbable victory for perennial Democratic candidate Alva Adams. But no sooner were the votes tallied than Republicans began to allege massive voter fraud in Denver.
The Democrats respond, well, there was also illegal Republican voting, which was true in other areas. It was a hopelessly corrupt election on all sides. But at any rate, the Supreme Court throws Adams out and reinstalls Peabody. But the Democrats are so outraged and there's such an uproar there that they come to a compromise, and Peabody resigns, and his lieutenant governor, Jesse McDonald, takes the governorship. So you had 3 governors, Alva Adams, James M. Peabody, and Jesse McDonald, and within 24 hours running the state in a sad day in 1905.
Colorado had arrived on the national scene not as the shining example of prosperity and enlightenment envisioned by every governor from Gilpin down to Peabody himself, but as the latest example of American political corruption run amok. If ever in the history of Colorado there was a time for a reformer to take the stage, it was now. Luckily, just such a man waited in the wings. He was known as Honest John Shafroth. During 4 terms representing Colorado in the United States Congress, John Shafroth not only fought hard to fund good roads and irrigation projects for Colorado, he also took an outspoken and principled stance on behalf of national women's suffrage and election campaign reform, controversial issues that most congressmen of the period avoided. Then, in 1902, he did something truly unprecedented. Informed he had been re-elected by fraudulent means, he resigned his seat immediately. When Shafroth announced his intention to run for governor in 1908, civic-minded Coloradoans quickly recognized his candidacy as their best hope for meaningful reform. Shafroth won the election. But when he presented his reform package to a legislature comprised of old guard Republicans and machine Democrats, he was met with firm resistance. Then in the 1911 election campaign, Denver mayor and Democratic boss Robert Speer tried to have the popular governor removed from the party ticket. Shafroth took his reform message directly to the people, traveling to towns across the state. The ploy worked, and Shafroth's re-election that fall sent a strong message to the recalcitrant legislators. One by one, Shafroth's reforms were brought to a vote and passed. By the time Shafroth left office in 1913, the list of reforms enacted under his leadership encompassed virtually the entire progressive platform.
Shafroth, in his 2 periods of governorship, pushed through such things as initiative, which was the right of citizens to initiate laws, referendum, the right of citizens to vote on laws passed by their legislature, which they weren't too happy with, and recall, if they got enough people to sign a petition, they could recall their legislature. He was also involved in bills to stop child labor. He was involved in women's issues, conservation. In those 4 years as governor, he did more probably than any other one single governor that had a long-range impact on the state and on the people of Colorado.
On a cold February day in 1922, honest John Shafroth lay in state at the base of the Capitol's grand stairway. The working men and women filing past his coffin couldn't help but be aware that this Capitol building was literally changing beneath their feet into a different kind of space. A space where balanced representative government was not simply a dream, but something that might actually be made reality. As if to drive the point home, when mourners strolled out onto the steps of the west entrance, the view before them was completely transformed from that of a generation before. Mayor Speer may have opposed Shafroth's reforms, but he was not without his own grand vision for bringing Denver into the modern age. Inspired by the City Beautiful movement gripping the nation, he began in 1904 to transform Denver to a Paris on the Platte. By 1922, the view from the Capitol steps encompassed a magnificent civic center park. Telephone and electric lines were buried, billboards banned. Newly planted trees and decorative street lights lined the streets. Fountains and monuments lent the park a sense of drama and purpose, none more so than the elegant Greek amphitheater, Voorhees Memorial, and Carnegie Library. Denver's Paris on the Platte would have to wait, however, for soon after Shafroth's death, a faltering Colorado economy threatened to undermine a generation of progress and return Denver to the rough and tumble conditions of its earliest days. The Great Depression came early to Colorado. By the mid-1920s, mining output was on the decline, and a series of dry summers resulted in poor harvests and a dwindling rural population. Against the backdrop of growing economic hardship, the Ku Klux Klan won thousands of adherents in Colorado and came to dominate the state legislature almost overnight. To many Coloradoans, Klan-supported Governor Clarence Morley seemed to advocate sensible measures: improve schools, higher prices for agricultural goods, and reduce government spending. In fact, Morley's tenure as governor proved singularly divisive, and the scandal-ridden Colorado Klan suffered a decline as precipitous as its rise. Still, far from being an anomaly, the Colorado Klan was like other movements in the state's history that discriminated against people based on ethnic and religious differences. Although Klan influence died out by 1928, Colorado's ethnic intolerance would make headlines again 8 years later with Governor Edwin Johnson.
In 1936, he closed Colorado's border with New Mexico in order to keep any potential immigrants or indigents without a job from coming in and competing for jobs. New Mexico's Governor Clyde Tingley wrote a scathing letter to Governor Johnson saying, you know, many of the people who you're excluding, their grandparents and great-grandparents were born here before you and your ancestors came here. So how can you keep them out?
My family first came north to this part of the world in 1600. That's 400 years, that we've been here in this state. And so to have anyone suggest that we are not entitled or that we shouldn't be here is ludicrous.
The important thing to remember about Ed Johnson was how very popular he was with Colorado voters. He stood up for many conservative Coloradans as the champion of local control against the big government of Roosevelt's New Deal.
Though a Democrat, Johnson was ideologically opposed to increasing the size of government at a time when tax revenues seemed in permanent decline. But for President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, participation in New Deal programs was not optional. He gave Johnson a simple choice: contribute state funds to his programs or see the flow of federal money to Colorado cut off. Johnson capitulated, diverting state highway funds to match federal relief dollars for Colorado. When Roosevelt visited the Colorado Capitol in October of 1936, he came as a conquering hero, drawing one of the largest crowds ever assembled there.
true conservative seeks to protect the system of private property and free enterprise by correcting such injustices and inequalities as arise from it.
As always, the Capitol building itself reflected the new spirit of the age. Alan True's 8-panel mural in the Great Rotunda, begun in 1934 with a grant from Roosevelt's Federal Emergency Relief Agency, paid tribute not to Colorado's most successful capitalists, but to the ordinary and anonymous men and women whose daily labors made progress and prosperity possible. After federal funding ran out, philanthropist Claude Betcher and the Betcher Foundation supported the completion of the work, which True installed in 1940.
The Alan True murals depicting the history of water begins with American Indians and thunderstorms. It follows pioneers and gold miners, irrigated farms. It follows hydroelectric power, all the way around to a scene showing the beauty, the opportunity on the horizon, using this resource carefully to benefit the entire state.
Each panel is accompanied by a verse penned by poet Thomas Hornsby Farrell, whose father, William Farrell, was curator of the Capitol's popular historical collections a generation before. In his final panel, the artist imagines what lies ahead.
True wanted to leave it up to future generations to figure out how they were going to deal with this issue of water. And the fact that this old pioneer with the white beard is sitting there looking on youth and kind of questioning them, and he's got an empty glass of water and it's upside down.
This humble paean to work and community in the heart of Colorado's capital would serve as a reminder to generations to come that Colorado recognizes the contributions of all its citizens. It was a message that could not have come at a better time, for the extraordinary pressures and stresses of World War II were feeding yet another epidemic of intolerance. In 1942, the American government rounded up 110,000 Japanese American citizens from the Pacific coast and prepared to ship them to internment camps deep within the country. Far from protesting this violation of constitutional rights, American statesmen and press outlets competed to see who could demand the harshest treatment for the interned Japanese. One man stood in opposition to the rhetoric: Colorado Governor Ralph Carr.
And in that he was alone among all Western governors, many of them who issued extremely intolerant statements and threatened to hang the Japanese if they were brought into their state. Governor Carr took the high road, and he gave the Japanese hope that even after the war, they could have a life in this state.
Rarely in American political history has an elected official taken such a huge political risk for no other reason than to do what he believed was right. When citizens in the southeastern Colorado town of Granada threatened violence against Japanese Americans relocated there, Carr traveled to the community and directly confronted the mob.
And he said to them, we have to stand up in principle for the rights of the Japanese, because next time it could be you or you or you who faces this.
The memory of his deeds, while not helping him win Ed Johnson's U.S. Senate seat in a 1942 campaign, did elevate Carr to a place of special distinction in Colorado's capital. The post-war years brought boom times to Colorado, reminiscent of the heady days when the Capitol building was constructed, and there seemed to be no end in sight. As modern skyscrapers changed the skyline of downtown Denver, Coloradoans gradually grew accustomed to seeing their venerable Capitol building stand out against a glittering backdrop of steel and glass. Modern-day immigrants from across the country flocked to Colorado as a place promising that rarest of combinations: abundant open space and opportunities for employment. Colorado's capital, a conventional place of customs and traditions, wasn't always quick to grasp the new realities. Then came an overwhelming series of national catastrophes: the Kennedy assassination, Vietnam, the Mideast oil embargo, Nixon. The era of popular dissent was born, and the west portal of the Capitol became center stage for the protests and petitions of the people. Few years saw more action than 1969. In April of that year, the Black Panthers joined forces with Chicanos to protest a lack of educational opportunities and the seeming indifference to their needs on behalf of elected officials. On Mexican Independence Day in September of '69, Chicanos returned with a force of 4,000.
We knew we didn't have political power. We knew that the only way to move the agenda for employment, education, health was through political action. And that was why students came together and marched on the Capitol.
To its credit, the state avoided the violent clashes between protesters and police, which seemed almost the norm in much of the nation. For this, many credit the cool-headed leadership of Governor John Love, who presided over the Colorado State House from 1963 to 1973. By the middle 1970s, the most tumultuous protests had passed, but the changes they wrought in Colorado's culture were still being felt. Elected in 1975, brash young environmentalist Governor Richard Lamb epitomized the new era with an independent style that seemed to fit the evolving cultural aesthetic. Reflecting these historic shifts, the legislature decided the time had come for another update to the Capitol building artwork, one that would make the building more truly representative of all Coloradoans. In 1976, to mark the 100th anniversary of Colorado's statehood, government officials dedicated Women's Gold, a spectacular silk tapestry commemorating the contributions of 19 women to Colorado history. Also that year came the addition of stained glass windows honoring Opportunity School founder Emily Griffith, former state treasurer Virginia Neal Blue, and territorial-era African-American businessman Barney Ford.
In the house, we only have one stained glass window. It's Barney Ford. He was influential in having Colorado not become a state until we became a free state.
The arc of history, as Dr. King said, is very long, and it bends towards justice. And that became very clear to me standing under Barney Ford's picture when I gave my first speech to the chamber as Speaker of the House.
Finally, in 1977, heritage windows were installed in the old Supreme Court room, honoring minority leaders in Colorado history. The mapmaker Don Miera y Pacheco, Ute chiefs Jack House and Buckskin Charlie, pioneering African-American businesswoman Clara Brown, Chinese businessman Chin Lin Su, and Japanese entrepreneur Naochi Hokazono. The legislature was justly proud of these latest additions to a glorious artistic collection. But for those charged with maintaining the Capitol's more basic functions, the growing splendor of the building's interior seemed to make elected officials overlook the precarious condition of the 100-year-old structure.
There were reports done in 1990 and 1995 to determine exactly what the structural condition of the Capitol was, and the news wasn't good. There were all sorts of fire dangers in the Capitol building. In fact, there was one report that suggested that from the moment a wastebasket fire would start, it could be as soon as 8 minutes later that there would start being structural collapse in the building.
With their feet literally held to the fire, the legislature finally approved a multi-year life safety project to install sprinklers and emergency exit stairways throughout the building, funded by the State Historical Fund, a program of History Colorado. But even before that project was completed, it became clear that the Capitol building had developed another potentially life-threatening problem. A study revealed that the cast iron supports holding the dome in place were severely damaged by water seepage and rust.
Well, in 2006, I got a call that a piece of the dome had fallen off. It had fallen from the ceiling of the outside observation deck.
The Capitol building is well over a century old now, and we're at a point now where we're faced with an absolute demand for maintenance and repairs of that dome that can't be put off any longer.
All of the painted gray cast iron is failing, and it needs to be removed, and then the rivets are deteriorating in various areas. So we need to investigate and replace those metal rivets with stainless steel.
Clearly, the Capitol building is now showing its age. In Michigan and Texas, where Elijah Myers designed capitals were built in the same era as Colorado's, painstaking restorations undertaken in the 1980s and 90s won widespread praise. But with estimates for a full rehabilitation of the Colorado Capitol running as high as $250 million, the project is virtually impossible to fund without first passing the difficult hurdle of voter approval. One day soon, Coloradoans will have to decide.
There are few symbols that are more powerful for the state of Colorado than our gold dome on the state capitol.
The people of Colorado have to rally around this building. Its care, its condition is our responsibility. And we have to do everything we can, even in difficult times, to save this structure that represents all of us.
Future governors, legislators, and citizens could surely gather in another building to face the issues of their time. But there is reason to doubt if they would remember as clearly in a new setting the lessons of Colorado's history. Separated from the symbols of the past, would government be guided as well by the demands of destiny? And would the immortal words of Thomas Hornsby Farrell resound outside the Great Rotunda? Beyond the sundown is tomorrow's wisdom. Today is going to be long, long ago.
It gives you the sense that you're part of this great continuum, part of something that's much bigger than yourself. This is a building worth caring about and worth maintaining and keeping as a symbol of all that's great about the state of Colorado.
If you could give me a magic wand and say you can have a new multi-million-dollar new capital like they have in a number of states, I'd say no. You need the sense of historical proportion that the capital gives us. The whole traditions of Colorado being a mixture of cultures and people. Winston Churchill said it best. We build our buildings, and then they build us.
Start with referred question 2M, which deals with zoning. It asks if the charter of the City and County of Denver be amended concerning zoning to remove existing charter language regarding the Board of Adjustment and require that the procedures for appeals, variances, and exceptions from the zoning code be addressed in city ordinance instead of in the charter. Here are the pros and cons for referred question 2M.
Those in favor of referred question 2M say the measure removes the Board of Adjustment for zoning appeals from the charter, but still requires City Council to provide a path for zoning variances, appeals, or exceptions through the City Code. By removing these 100-year-old provisions from the charter, the Code can modernize variance standards used by the Board of Adjustment to keep up with adopted plans, including to facilitate preservation of existing buildings and provide greater efficiency to those seeking variances and appeals.
No comments against this measure were submitted.
My name is Hunter Hayes, and I know my buzzed warning signs. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Cut! Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Okay, buzz driving. I feel like I'm not being real.
I think if you just do it the way we're asking.
Why don't I do the interview? You can sit here and just... Can you say it? Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Yeah, just loosen up.
As mayor, I have the honor and privilege of performing this civil ceremony tonight. We gather here to unite Anna, Simon, and Fran Simon in civil union.
My friend, take care, Anna, as my life partner.
And pledge to you my love.
And tonight is a time to celebrate yet again another major milestone on the journey that is the project of your sacred union.
Oh my gosh, it was just a euphoric time. It was really something. And the flash bulbs are going like crazy, and
then our picture was all over the media the next day.
I knew this thing was going to pass eventually, and we would just keep showing up until it did.
So I'm Fran Simon.
I'm Anna Simon.
And we've been together for 18 years.
Very young, and I was told that because of my disability, nobody would ever cast me. Luckily, I went to a school where the choir director fought with the Board of Education to bring theater into this school and expose us to theater, and that, was the first spark for the founders of Family to do this.
Of course, I was saddened to hear that your exams came off rather less well.
So Family Theater Company is the longest running theater company devoted to creating theater for individuals with disabilities. We produce 3 shows a year, usually a musical, a play, and then some other devised piece or piece that was written specifically for our actors. We work with individuals with all types of disabilities. If you are someone that the traditional mold of theater and rehearsal doesn't work for you, you are very welcome in our company.
It's too absurd.
I'd never wanted to audition for Family in the first place. Kind of like our lovely, amazing founders, my high school experience trying to break into acting was very similar. They didn't know how to get the blind person on stage or to move around on stage. So they would put me in like stationary spaces and leave me there. A lot of blindness spaces at that time in my 14-year-old teenage mind were, adults just trying to stifle kids because of their disabilities and not allowing them to have real-world experiences. And I was afraid that Family was going to be like that. And I'm so glad to say that I was so wrong. I didn't realize what it would mean until I really became an adult to have this sort of space.
I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. I also have an ADHD diagnosis and an autism diagnosis. And at any other theater company, it would be like, okay, leave that at the door. And here space is made for that. And that doesn't happen in a lot of places in the world. There's not space made for when people need extra anything. I'm grateful that I live in Denver and that this space exists.
So very exciting. It's our 34th season. We're starting with Spring Awakening at the Parsons Stage at North Glen Arts. We are then going back home to the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, and we'll be presenting Midsummer Night's Dream, which will be our first ever fully produced Shakespeare. Our last show of the year, which is really fun, is we are partnering with the Silhouettes to perform a show called Indescribable. So Spring Awakening is one of the most exciting musicals I have ever read and seen and listened to. It tells the story of two teenagers in provincial Germany around 1890s or so that are very, very sheltered by their parents, specifically when it comes to adult topics such as sex, such as violence, things like that.
This show also deals with suicide and self-harm and not feeling like you belong in this world. This soundtrack has gotten me through tough times as a teenager, and then some of this soundtrack came through after my sister passed away 6 years ago. And while my sister did not take her life, it was still a life that was gone far too soon. And there is a song that deals with that called Left Behind.
We in the disabled community are so used to being infantilized by the general public. They look at someone in a wheelchair, they look at someone who's blind or who has Tourette's or who has autism, and they go, oh, we can't talk about that subject, or we can't talk about this subject. And I think what this show really means to our company in particular, and why I think it's a completely different experience coming to see it at Family, is you get that idea of this is what happens when you don't treat disabled folk as people. And these are the dangers in it.
When you actually get to come to Family and perform roles, it's very special, and you realize what a privilege it is, because not many disabled actors, not many actors in general, get to do some of the stuff that Family does.
People have said so many times when they see a family show that 10 minutes into the show, they forget that there's people with disabilities on that stage. And that's the same way with life, too. You know, people, talk with me, they don't realize that I'm missing fingers. They don't realize that I'm missing legs. And that's what you want. You want people to just see a mother on the stage or a lawyer on the stage, and not a person with a disability on the stage.
And I think that this theater company shows that despite what people's limitations are and despite what people have been through, there's still human capability to express and create. That is what people should come and expect from a family show, not woohoo a group of disabled actors doing the best they can. Like, this is serious art, and it demands and deserves to be taken seriously.
And my junk is you. My junk is you.
Stay elevated by subscribing to the city's YouTube page, and stay tuned to our social media channels for more content. Don't miss our new episodes of Elevating Denver, premiering each month. Thanks for watching, Denver. In March on Elevating Denver, wonder at the vast cosmos above.
Sometimes they don't believe what they're seeing.
In Dog We Trust at the Colorado Kennel Club.
If you love dogs, this is the place to be.
And go backstage with the Family Theater Company. Those stories and more on the next episode of Elevating Denver.
Get ready, Denver. It's almost time to vote for our mayor, city council, clerk and recorder, auditor, and more. Drop off your ballot or be in line to vote by 7 p.m. on Tuesday, April 4th. And be ready when it's time to vote.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and the reason why I'm voting is because I just had a son last year, and I want him to grow up in a Denver that is safe, that is healthy, where we have healthy water to drink, and where we take care of each other.
In Denver, the road most traveled is full of potholes. Fear not, worried traveler. Denver's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure is ready to fix the problem. To report a pothole, call 311 or go online at pocketgov.org. Click on the button, Report a Problem, fill out the quick questionnaire, and within 72 hours, crews will be sent to fix the problem. Call 311 or go online at pocketgov.org. Denver is a vibrant and active place, and there are events happening every day in our community. And now it's easier than ever to find out what's going on in your neighborhood and across the city. Just check out the What's Near Me feature on denvergov.org. From our many recreation centers, vaccination clinics, festivals, venues, and even cats on mats, there's so much to explore. Just enter your address or scroll across the map to see what pops up. What's Near Me? Yet another amazing feature on the all-new denvergov.org.
Hi, I'm Dominic Gazzuti telling you why I believe it's important to vote in a local election. Whether it be the park where I walk my dog or the road that I drive on, the people and issues on a local ballot determine what's going to happen in my world, in my community. I want a voice. That's why I vote in local elections.
Denver's hot crosswalk signals are helping us cross streets more safely. Just press the button to activate the flashing yellow warning lights so drivers are alerted to slow down and stop, giving pedestrians a safe way to cross. Visit denvergov.org/Vision Zero.
Hey Denver, the decision is yours on April 4th. Make your voice heard by voting in the 2023 municipal election. Stay up to date on the candidates and the issues you'll see on your ballot at denverdecides.org. There you'll find Denver's most complete guide to help you choose your next mayor, city council members, and more. Candidate profiles, live candidate forums, and ballot issue breakdowns can all be found at denverdecides.org. Denver Decides, where Denver voters turn to get informed.
Welcome to your Denver City Council. Please stand by. Full coverage of your Denver City Council begins now.
Council will now reconvene from our earlier session. There is no unfinished business, but we do have two proclamations being read today. Councilwoman Ortega, will you please read Proclamation 23-0316?
Thank you, Madam President. Proclamation 23-0316, a proclamation recognizing Nowruz. Whereas protests broke out across Iran after 22-year-old Iranian and Kurdish woman Mahsa Jina Amini died on September 16, 2022, after being arrested and brutally beaten by the mortality police for allegedly violating the Islamic dress code for women. And whereas there have been at least 4 additional executions without due process of law, hundreds of beatings, thousands of arbitrary arrests, and belated releases from custody and relentless intimidations of law-abiding citizens. And whereas the women-led protests in Iran have turned into sustained struggle for regime change and for human rights, especially for women's and children's rights, gender equality, economic justice, and environmental protection under the terms women, life, freedom. And whereas there are thousands of Iranian Americans living in Colorado, as well as many global citizens connected to the people and culture of the land of Iran, who cherish the ancient spring equinox celebration of Nowruz, March 20th through 21st, 2023. And whereas the current Islamic Republic dictatorial regime has also restricted the internet, cutting access to Instagram, WhatsApp, and other apps to prevent communication access to information and freedom of expression, to repress the rights of Iranian citizens, journalists, and human rights defenders. And whereas on December 14, 2022, Iran was removed from the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women following widespread international condemnation for its attacks on protesters, which was a move supported by prominent women's rights activists in Iran, several Iranian American elected officials serving in the United States, and Biden administration, and thousands of Iranian American residents who signed a petition in support. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Council of the City and County of Denver that the Council of the City and County of Denver hereby recognizes Nowruz on March 20th through 21st and affirms support for the Iranian people engaged in peaceful protest for their fundamental rights. Section 2, that the Secretary of the Council shall affix the seal of the City and County of Denver to this proclamation, and that a separate copy be transmitted to the Colorado Middle East Peace Coalition and a separate copy to the Iranian people.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Ortega, your motion to adopt.
I move for adoption of Proclamation 23-0316.
Thank you. Let's get that moved and seconded. There we go. Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. Comments by members of council. Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you, Madam President. Nowruz marks the Persian New Year that is typically celebrated, as you heard me read, on March 20th through 21st. This is a 4,000-year-old tradition that is known as a festival of fire. I wanted to pay tribute to and highlight Iranian women and girls, one of whom is my own goddaughter who lives in the Washington, D.C. area, who has taken to the streets in Iran and throughout cities across the United States to protest the death of last year, Mahsa Amini. President Biden also commemorated this holiday while speaking at the White House. The reception is the largest White House Nowruz celebration to date, according to President Biden. And we just got notification from our mayor's office that there is an event being held on Wednesday in celebration of Nowruz. So I wanted to just draw attention to this important holiday and to the acts against women, especially, that are happening in Iran, and the importance that we all, especially women, stand in solidarity with the women from Iran. So I just want to encourage everyone's support for this proclamation this evening.
Great, thank you very much. Seeing no one else in queue, Madam Secretary, roll call.
Sita Baca.
Aye.
Herndon. Black.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Flynn.
Aye.
Gilmore.
Aye.
Hines. Cashman.
Aye.
Kinich.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Sandoval.
Aye.
Sawyer.
Aye.
Madam President.
Aye. Madam Secretary, close the voting and announce the results.
11 ayes.
11 ayes. Proclamation 23-0316 has been adopted. We have about 5 minutes for the proclamation acceptance. Councilwoman Ortega, we'll start the timer if you'd like to call up whoever you'd like to accept.
Yes, we have 2 people in the audience I'm going to ask to speak. First is Bob Knott, and then I apologize, I'm not remembering your name, but the young lady who's, okay, we will have her speak a few minutes after Bob does. And I want to thank Bob for reaching out, asking that this proclamation be brought forward. And Bob, if you want to come to the microphone, and then when we're all done, I'll get copies of the proclamation to both of you, and we'll meet out in the hallway. So Bob first.
We are grateful to Councilmember Ortega for bringing forward this proclamation. Nowruz is one of the most ancient spring holiday traditions in the world. We're also particularly appreciative of the proclamation expressing, insofar as it expresses solidarity with the human rights struggles in Iran. We oppose the Islamic Republic government, and we seek constitutional democracy with civil liberties in Iran. And we have been lobbying elected representatives. We go to our members of Congress and state representatives on issues impacting Iranian Americans and Iran itself. We will be glad to discuss these issues concerning Iran and Iranian Americans with other groups or with any American citizens and groups. So we're very thankful to the council and particularly to Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, would you like to come up and make some remarks? Is it, sir?
My name is Babak Bezadi, and I live in Colorado. We're very grateful for recognizing Nowruz as a Persian Iranian New Year. Iranians, we're about 8,000 to 10,000 strong here in Colorado, and very good citizen, very successful, least crimes. We're very proud of that. And one thing what we wanted you to know was that there are self-proclaimed organizations saying that they represent Iranian Americans. And one of them is NIAC. And we certainly wanted to make sure that you know they're not representative of Iranian Americans, neither here nor in other states. And in Iran, even a rapper, in Iran, a rapper says that NIAC is not our representative. He is actually being in prison today. And it is very unfortunate to see these self-proclaimed lobbyists or organizations doing so. However, we are grateful for the recognition of Nowruz and woman life freedom that you put in the proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilman Ortega. I will read Proclamation 23-0317, a proclamation for Cesar Chavez Day. Whereas Cesar Estrada Chavez was born on March 31st, 1927 on a small farm near Yuma, Arizona, and joined the migrant stream with his family at an early age. And whereas during the Great Depression, Cesar's father lost his small farming business, and the family joined some 30,000 farm workers following the crops from Arizona to Texas to California into Colorado. And whereas he left school following the 8th grade to work in the fields and vineyards of the Southwest to help support his family. And whereas in 1944, at the young age of 17, Cesar Chavez joined the Navy and served this country honorably, and the USNS Cesar Chavez AKE-14, a Lewis and Clark dry cargo ship, is the first ship operated by the United States Navy to be named for Cesar Chavez. And whereas farm workers suffered from racial discrimination and exploitative working conditions, Cesar Chavez dedicated his life to improving the plight of farm workers through struggle, sacrifice, and self-denial. And whereas Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta in 1962 created the National Farm Workers Association, which later became United Farm Workers of America, UFW, that would bring justice to farm workers that had been denied the right to build a union, therefore had no collective bargaining rights throughout history, and won equal rights and fair treatment against scrupulous growers. And whereas it is socially just to recognize Dolores Huerta, along with many other women farm workers, who created a unique voice for women farm workers. And whereas Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta led a strike of California grape pickers to demand higher wages and called for a boycott against grapes and lettuce. And whereas Cesar and the UFW believed in the principles of nonviolence practiced by Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., using tactics such as pilgrimages, boycotts, marches, strikes, and fasts to lead a successful 5-year boycott against agribusiness, developing a national movement. And whereas in 1975, Cesar and the work of the UFW resulted in California's Agricultural Labor Relations Act, a groundbreaking law that protected farm workers and ensured them the right to unionize. And whereas in 1994, President Bill Clinton posthumously awarded Cesar Chavez the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. And whereas in 1991, Mexico awarded Cesar Chavez the Aztec Eagle, Mexico's highest award, presented to the people of Mexican heritage. And whereas on April 23rd, 1993, Cesar Chavez died peacefully in his sleep in San Luis, Arizona. And whereas Cesar Chavez was an inspiration to millions of Americans to seek out social justice and civil rights of the poor and disenfranchised across the world. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the City and County Council of the City and County of Denver that the Council of the City and County of Denver hereby recognizes that Monday, March 27th be recognized as Cesar Chavez Day, and that the Secretary of the Council shall affix the seal of the City and County of Denver to this proclamation, and that a copy be transmitted to the Cesar Chavez Peace and Justice Committee. Thank you. I will now offer a motion to adopt. I move that proclamation 23-0317 be adopted, and it has been moved and seconded. Thank you. And we will take comments. I will speak initially, and anyone else wishing to enter the queue. I just want to thank the Peace and Justice Committee every year for being here, and every day for making sure that the work of Cesar and Dolores are remembered continuously in and throughout Denver and Colorado. They are joined by us today, and several of us on this council are here because of not just the work of them, but also the work of the committee. And we just thank you immensely for helping keep his legacy alive and remembered throughout the city and throughout the state of Colorado. Councilwoman Sandoval.
Thank you, Council President. I would just like to invite everyone to join us on Saturday, March 1st for the Cesar Chavez March in Northwest Denver. There's a mass at Regis University at 8:30, and then the march will meet at Cesar Chavez Park on 41st and Tennyson. So I look forward to joining the committee and everyone else. I just want to say thank you for always reminding us that the work we do is built on top of the shoulders of those who come before us, and that we are elected to make sure that we continue to do that work, and the legacy lives on. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Ortega.
Council President Torres, I want to thank you for bringing this forward. I know this is a proclamation that we do annually, and I want to thank the Peace and Justice Committee for your ongoing work that you have done year after year for many, many years in drawing attention to the many contributions that Cesar Chavez made to farm workers who, you know, for so long didn't really have the right working environment, the right wages, and the boycotts really involved the American community to understand the plight of our farm workers. And without them, we wouldn't have food on our tables. And just being able to keep this struggle alive is very important. So I just want to say thank you for all of your work in just keeping this important, not just the holiday and the fact that Councilwoman Ramona Martinez was the one who brought the holiday forward, but lots of people were involved in making this happen, and you all have been at the forefront of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sedebaca.
Thank you. I have had the great honor of spending part of my career working with the Cesar Chavez family and their granddaughters specifically. And so I wanted to thank the Peace and Justice Committee for keeping this alive here in Denver, and thank the Councilwoman for bringing this to us. Also, I'd just like to remind folks that the struggle is not over, and there are people who put food on our table every single day who themselves cannot afford food or a roof over their heads. And I hope that this is a reminder that we have to stay committed to this fight and to making sure that there's justice everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And seeing no one else in queue, Madam Secretary, roll call.
Sedebaca.
Aye.
Herndon. Black.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Flynn.
Aye.
Gilmore.
Aye.
Hines. Cashman.
Aye.
Kinich.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Sandoval.
Aye.
Sawyer. Aye. Madam President.
Aye. Madam Secretary, close the voting and announce the results.
11 ayes.
11 ayes. Proclamation 23-0317 has been adopted. We have a few minutes for proclamation acceptance, and I'd like to ask Dr. Ramon Del Castillo, Dr. Antonio Esquivel, and Manny Del Rio to join us at the podium to accept.
You know, looking around this room, it looks like I'm the oldest guy in the room, and probably the only guy in the room who actually marched with Cesar Chavez back in 1968. I was the first chair of the Denver Grape Boycott Committee. You might remember we went on a 10-day fast back in 1969. But we are here to represent the Cesar Chavez Peace and Justice Committee that organizes this march that we're talking about. My other two compañeros are going to talk a little bit about this thing, but you know, we have with us one of the co-chairs of the committee, Dr. Ramon Del Castillo, another member of the committee, Manny Lopez Del Rio, and myself, I'm Dr. Antonio Esquivel. You've already heard about what we're going to have. You know, we're going to start out with a mass at Regis University at 8:30 in the morning. We're going to assemble outside of the chapel there, and then we're going to march over to Cesar Chavez Park, which is over on 42nd and Tennyson. And there we're going to have a celebration where we'll read this proclamation that you just passed. Yeah. So we'd like to invite you to any part of that. Come to the Mass, come to the march, or come to the celebration down at Cesar Chavez Park. You know, the Justice Committee, the Cesar Chavez Peace and Justice Committee, has a mission. And its mission is to pay tribute and homage to the ideals of justice and nonviolence embodied by Cesar Chavez. He is one of America's greatest leaders, whose legacy for global working class interests and whose contributions towards peace and humanity for all should be remembered by all of us in practice. And let me introduce Dr. Ramon Del Castillo.
Good afternoon, I'm Ramon Del Castillo. Yeah, I too knew Cesar Chavez. I, with some leaders out of Colorado, ran the lettuce boycott in northern Colorado. What we've tried to do is really create a legacy of a heritage of peace to pass on to the next generation. And every year we pick a theme that's consistent with the philosophy of Cesar Chavez. It's nonviolence. So let me read a couple of comments. I'm working on a speech that I'm going to make at the church on that day. Violence in American society may not be feasible and sustainable without building a culture of peace. as we prepare to celebrate the 22nd annual march to honor the legacy of Cesar Estrada Chavez with a theme of reclaiming male responsibility through nonviolence, communities plagued with this epidemic might want to seriously consider studying Cesar Chavez's life and his philosophy of nonviolence. He was one of the few leaders that stringently practiced nonviolence. He was in the face of angry and violent men who were accustomed to using violence to control others. Chavez nonviolently confronted agribusiness with their megabucks and inhumane labor policies, and he did so on behalf of powerless farm workers and inhumane labor policies. He did so, his cause was not hedonistic, it was activism at its best. To understand peace, one must understand what violence does to our collective spirit. We constantly remind ourselves that only through the practice of nonviolence can human beings achieve the high ideals set forth by Cesar Chavez and other leaders that sacrificed their lives for the greater good. Chavez believed that nonviolence retains the unconditional dignity of the individual, and to act violently would lead to self-destruction and to violence with others. As I reflect over the last 21 years that the Cesar Chavez Peace and Justice Committee of Denver has done its work, I am grateful to the commitment that my compañeros and compañeras on the committee have made. They have faithfully devoted and sacrificed time away from their families and significant others to keep the legacy of social justice and activism practiced by Cesar Chavez alive. As Jose Antonio Orozco states in his book, Cesar Chavez and the Common Sense of Nonviolence, the grandest legacy of La Causa would be a contribution to the development of a culture that can work toward a better world. The United Nations Economic, Social, and Cultural Organization that defines peace as, quote, a set of values, attitudes, modes of behavior, and ways of life that reject violence and prevent conflicts by tackling the root causes and solving problems through dialogue and negotiation among individuals, groups, and nations. That's why we have invited our young men, with all of the violence that's happening in the world, to come and learn how to make peace. And we say the same to you in the work that you do, in the dialogue that you do with each other, that you remain peaceful with each other, and that you honor the dignity and the honor of each human being. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Manny, did you have any comments?
Thanks so much for having us, Council. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think I just want to recognize the original founding members of the committee, Dr. Ramon del Castillo, Charlene Ortiz Barriento, Isidro Jaramillo, and Toby LaRue. One thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that if it wasn't for this committee, this event would not happen, and we wouldn't have the opportunity to commemorate the life of Cesar Chavez. One of the first things that you learn when you get to Denver and you hang out in the northwest part of Denver is that it is not the Highlands, it's not Sloan's Lake, it is the Denver North Side. And this is one of the cultural treasures that this committee keeps living on and on and on every year. This committee is very committed to that community. They raised thousands of dollars. I believe the statue's worth $32,000. That statue that's at that park, this committee put that money together and they put it there and they donated it to the city. I couldn't think of any other group that has done more for this holiday, for the march, for the cause than this committee. And yeah, thanks for having me today. And we look forward to having you at the event. It's on April 1st. We're gonna start the Mass at Regis around 8:30. And then shortly after the Mass, we're gonna gather in front of the chapel and we'll start our march over to Cesar Chavez Park. The event runs until 2 o'clock. So we would love to have you guys there. There's gonna be food, drinks, burritos, and entertainment. So we look forward to having you there, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Yes, come on up.
I wanted to thank Councilman.
Come on up to the microphone so folks can hear.
I wanted to personally, on behalf of the group, thank Councilperson Amanda Sandoval, who's worked with us diligently every year and provided some of the resources and worked with us in the police department. So we really thank you for that.
Thank you all for being here. Everybody, thank you for being here. We do not have any public hearings tonight. On Tuesday, March 28th, 2023, Council will hold a required public hearing on Council Bill 23-0215, approving the respective first amendments to service plan for the respective Denargo Market Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 through 3. And on Monday, April 10th, 2023, Council will hold a required public hearing on Council Bill 23-0206, designating 618 South Monroe Way as a structure for preservation. There being no further business before this body, this meeting is adjourned.